Hello there, and welcome to the first episode of Bow and Blade, a podcast brought to you by Medievalist.net, your home for all things medieval on the internet. Bow and Blade gives you a seat at the bar as scholars of medieval warfare go beyond the Wikipedia articles to talk about the debates and questions that we're working on today. I'm Michael Livingston, professor at the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina.
And I'm Kelly DeVries, professor of Loyola University in Maryland. I'm also honorary historical consultant for the Royal Armouries, UK.
Which is legit. Like that's like a knighthood, isn't it? Yeah.
Not quite a knighthood. I keep looking at the lists every time the Queen has a birthday. I think I'm also about four miracles short of sainthood, but otherwise, yeah, it's legit.
4 miracles short. Damn it. We'll work on that. Okay. Yeah. And what are you drinking tonight at the bar, man?
I've got myself a little Calvados, a little apple wine from the Norman region of northern France. Stick with the product that probably got the boys going in the 1066.
Excellent. I figured I would, for a Bow and Blade podcast, I should enjoy some Blade and Bow, which is a Kentucky straight bourbon, and obviously hoping to nail additional sponsorships. If they'd like to send those to me directly, I would appreciate that very much. So as Kelly said,
bourbon, the drink of Middle Ages. There we go.
As Kelly said, today on Bow and Blade, we'll be talking about the Battle of Hastings, 1066, and all that. So what we're going to do is start with a basic overview of our topic, the who, what, where, when, and why, the real basic stuff. These are the essentials, a foundation and context for the rest of the podcast, which is going to be more like what you would actually genuinely hear if you happened upon Kelly and I at the bar and listened in.
Not always agreeing. Not always
in this
agreeing.
Case, yeah, not always agreeing. And in this case, these are actually debates that we did have while we were writing our popular guidebook tastings that came out earlier this year from Pen and Sword Books. It's called 1066, A Guide to the Battle and the Campaigns, available wherever fine books are sold, and even perhaps unfine books. I don't know.
And on the Pen and Sword website, Amazon, all those other places.
All those goodies. So we want to go through, how did we come to the conclusions we did? What did we lose sleep over? What did we fight about? Who won those fights? We may not give that away. But certainly a sense of how we actually do this work and continue to do this work on other projects. So before we get into those nitty-gritty details, I think we've got some patrons at the bar wanting to listen in. So let's get the crowd up to speed with the essentials. Kelly, start us off if you can. A summary of the Battle of Hastings. Like 5 minutes, man. No pressure. Clock is running. How did this happen?
The Normans attack Anglo-Saxon England. William the Conqueror wins.
God, wow.
Oh, you said 5 minutes. You didn't say 5 seconds.
Oh, right.
Sorry. Oh,
5 minutes.
Yeah,
sorry. You can expand. Pull that out.
Yeah, expand a bit. Okay. It is January 1066, and King Edward, the Confessor of England, has died. And when he dies, he points out, there's no question about this, points to his chief earl, Harold Godwinson, who had been his chief earl pretty much on and off since 1052, and says, you're going to be king. Harold gets a thumbs up from the other nobles in the kingdom at the Wittengemut, has different pronunciations for that, Wittengemut, which is the council of the Norman, or the council of the nobles in England. And he immediately recognizes, however, that he has some competition. In that competition is at least one person he knows of, which is William of Normandy, William the Duke of Normandy, who had been Duke of Normandy since 1049, and had, it seems, been promised the throne of England by Edward himself, and that promise confirmed by Harold when he was over and visiting perhaps 1063 or 1064. There are other contenders too.
How do we know that, Kelly? How do we know that that he made this promise?
How do we know that he made this promise? That's a good question, because pretty much because William tells us he did. There are several sources, contemporaries of the time, and the ones that are most strong, most certain about this promise is that it are the Anglo-Norman chroniclers, especially William of Poitiers, who is with William the Conqueror pretty much the entire time of William's reign as Duke of Normandy, and goes with him on the trip to conquer. Maybe not the trip in 1052, but the trip to conquer England. 1052 is an interesting tale. It's when the Godwin family, who kind of control England below the king, even including the queen. She is a Godwin daughter. The Godwinsons are all kicked out of England for an exile, lasts roughly a year. And during that time, William comes over, and Edward, seeming to need protection, if not from the Godwins, from everybody else who seems to know that this is a childless king who's getting older, and that he is not likely to be producing any children, any legitimate children, especially since he's just put his queen into a nunnery. So William runs with that, but it seems wide enough known, again, coming out of the Anglo-Norman sources, including the Bayeux Tapestry, to suggest that Harold had confirmed this with an oath taken on 2 relics when he was in Normandy. Again, our sources are almost specifically Anglo-Norman, except there is kind of an interesting offshoot of something written by an Anglo-Saxon who writes the biography of Edward's mother, and says, of Edward's reign, but writes it in the court, and is generally thought to be close to the Queen, that Harold was a little too willing to give oaths at times. He's talking about context with a breakdown between Harold and his brother in 1065, but the way that it is said could indicate that it could indicate a little bit more reliability on the fact that William had this promise to him. Harold had confirmed this promise, and then both Harold and Edward had sort of knifed the Duke in the back by having the kingship go to Harold in an unquestionable act by the king actually pointing out that he was going to be the successor on the deathbed.
And the council then affirming that, which they could do. They could give the crown to anybody, right?
They could. Well, I don't know that they had given it to too many people that didn't actually sit. We don't have all the records of the Wittengemut, but we do. But they had clearly given it to Harold in this occasion, and throughout the 11th century, they had clearly given it to his predecessors, all the way back to Canute. And so it was a form of advising council, not quite a parliament by any stretch, but it did indicate that it did come with some promises that there would be support for Harold in this case. So William is very upset. He's kind of very upset about this whole thing. And actually, let me throw this question to you, Mike. Why do you think it bothered William? I mean, he's Duke of Normandy. That's probably the second most powerful lord in the French court, after the Count of Flanders, who William's related to by marrying the Count of Flanders' daughter. Why in the hell did he need England? I mean, it's off the coast. He doesn't know what England is, except for the visit.
Well, I mean, this is actually a really good question. And in some respects, it's one that probably surprises a lot of people, because we, tend in the West to have a higher sense of England's status than is perhaps deserved at times. We have this, England is the center of all, which wasn't really the case, certainly in William's time. So why is William after this crown? To me, there's a couple of reasons that this could have been the case. One is from a diplomatic standpoint. Yeah, it's nice to be the Duke. It's better to be the king. That's just kind of the way things are. So we have that egotism, I guess we could say, just at a really basic level. We can't ever deny that from anybody. William was a man with a sense of himself, shall we say? We see that repeatedly, so that doesn't surprise me at all. It's also possible that William, to some degree, has a sense of controlling the English Channel. There would be something to be said monetarily and politically in the power of controlling both sides of that. That you've now got. I mean, still, today this is the most used shipping lane, I think, in the world. I'm not. Maybe that's not true. Seems like that's really true. It's like really used a lot.
It's either there or down the Malayan Straits.
Yeah. So this, even then, the shipping that's moving up and down this channel is really important. And I think economically, there's something to be said for if he can control this channel, he can actually leverage the English crown into be something that it isn't. He can make it into something that's quite remarkable and big and awesome. Now, of course, that doesn't end up working out for post-Hastings reasons. But yeah, we can't. We don't really have time for that. Though we should do a future episode on the Angevins and all that good stuff and how it all falls apart.
Falls apart. Yeah.
It all falls apart. Indeed, it does. So William's ticked off. He, for whether it's economics or just egotism or maybe he's not fully aware of how bad the economy is in England. He wants to go across and set things right. So what does he do, man?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and economically, I think you're right. We don't have the sheep, the wool industry yet there. I've always thought that it was the people too, that commanding a lot more people. There are some things he gets out of that, taxes. It has been said that, once he's ruling over England and France, that then he has more power at the French court. I would kind of say that isn't right when he then turns around and divides his kingdom up and gives his eldest son, Robert Normandy, and he gives his second son, William Rufus, England. The problem, of course, with all of that, as you alluded to, is that it's the third son he has to watch out for because Henry doesn't get anything and ends up with it all.
He ends up with everything.
Never miss out on a third son.
Oh.
You got to come up with something. Maine or something should be given to Henry. We might have a different history there. But he's not, and it's important to recognize William is pissed off. But what is not completely understood is that there's this guy up in the north, also named Harold, who's the king of Norway, who I don't think anybody has on the chessboard initially when they're looking down at this sort of thing. And Harold's trying to figure out, well, William is obviously going to answer this. And then William's saying, well, we're going to go over and take it. The only person we're going to have to go against is Harold. And there's another Harold up there. And not only that, but he's been encouraged in this by a visit from Harold Godwinson's brother, the King of England's brother, Tosti Godwinson, because Harold had to, or had been instrumental in his exile from the kingdom the year before Edward died after a revolt in Tosti's Northumbrian earldom had kicked him out, and so Tosti is kind of. It seems like there's a whole bunch of pissed off people all right around this area of Northern Europe. I don't think Harold Hardrada, the King of Norway, is particularly pissed off. He's kind of just hey, another place.
That's another place to hit, and he's probably. It should be pointed out. I mean, the guy he's a living legend at this point. I mean, Harold Hardrada has been all over the map. He's been a lot of fights. This is a big guy.
I think I tried to calculate it out. He may be the most traveled individual in the Middle Ages at this point in time. He's served as the head of the Varangian Guard in Byzantium. He's been up and down the Dnieper River and had married a Russian princess. Seems also may have married a Byzantine lady too. And he fought in Sicily, fought all over the Mediterranean, and now he's gone back home. And sure enough, he's dominated Denmark and as well as Norway. And sure enough, and into his court comes this exiled earl who says, "Hey, let's go to England." And I don't think it took a lot of encouragement to get Harold to say, "Okay, yeah, 300 ships. I got them here. We'll do it. Let's go."
So Harold of England is facing invasion from the north and/or east from Harold Hardrada, and invasion from the south from William of Normandy. So who hits the shores of England first?
Well, the shores of England are that's Harold Hardrada.
All right.
This comes as a surprise. There's no question. Everybody figures that knowledge is pretty open in some of these places. If you look at a map, Norway's pretty far away. And the fact that Tasse gets up there at all, I think is because he goes to Spain, the king of Denmark, and he sends him up there. And then, and otherwise, plus Harold's gathered his armies with the anticipation of having to defend the Channel. And so he's there on the Channel, or he's in the London Channel region. And suddenly he gets word out. We're not sure whether he gets word before Harold Hardrada hits Norway. Hits Scotland. But he does meet with Malcolm, the King of Scotland, up there, and at least gets a non-interference agreement with him, if not actually getting some Scottish troops with the fleet as well. And then he comes down the coast. He hits Cleveland. He hits various areas, and the news will trickle down to London. It doesn't actually make it to London until after Harold is on his way down. Let's get this last bit out. I'm rambling. Okay. So we don't know where Harold Hardrada. Still, let me go back one thought. Okay.
No worries.
We're not entirely certain. We're not entirely certain when Harold Godwinson gets word that Harold Hardrada has landed on England. He actually lands at Scotland first and has this agreement with Malcolm, the King of Scotland, at least not to interfere in the conquest, if not actually having picked up some Scottish troops there. And then he sails down the coast, and he has to go on shore a couple of times, I'm sure, to water his men, to fill his ships with water, with fresh water. And then he does hit Scarborough and does make a little bit of a mess of it, actually has the militia rise up against him, and the two of them pretty much have a stalemate before he gets on his ships and then further to the south. So Harold Hardrada lands in England first. After a little bit of a journey, he hits the shores of England and then up the rivers towards York, because, of course, Tasse knows York. And so word comes to Leofrich and Morkera, the Earl of Mercia and the Earl of Northumbria, and they put up a defense of York that loses the Battle of Fulford Gate. And then the Norwegian army goes on to York, captures it, and then goes out to a small place where they can rest, see the troops from afar if they need to, but mostly it's just rest, recuperation, at a place called Stamford.
And that battle does not go well for poor Harold Hardrada when Harold Godwinson finally shows up, which would be a great thing to go through all the details of that on a future episode. We're not going to do that. But so Harold Godwinson makes it up there, defeats Harold Hardrada and Tosti. They both die. It's very sad. But the English are probably high-fiving. Good job, everybody. Well done. It's incredible that we got up here as quickly as we did. We won. Huzzah. It's all over. And then news comes that, alas, in the south, William has now landed. So now poor Harold Godwinson has to turn around and go back down south. And
that's probably the most important thing for the Battle of Hastings and thinking about this is that by the time Harold Godwinson will now arrive at the battlefield of Hastings, his troops have marched the length of England twice. He's gone up and he's gone down, and that means that they're probably not fully there, either in body or in numbers. They're probably not in mind either, but they've got to be a tired lot. They've got to experienced soldiers. Even if they were on horseback, it would have taken it out of them. And Harold Godwinson decides, rather than waiting somewhere and letting the army recoup, he decides to go on and encounter William. I've always said he was flushed with victory. He just pretty easily defeated an army of experienced troops in the north. So now why not go down and take that experience, take that kind of flush of victory and face off against the Norman invasion.
Right. Other people have suggested that he needs to do it because his army is, in a sense, kind of getting less and less strong because it's harvest time. And so he's got potential of losing parts of his army. And so he wants to, do this while I'm at my strongest. And as I said, hopefully take him by surprise. Obviously, Harold does not end up writing his memoirs of this event and what he was thinking because he dies on the battlefield. So we don't know.
Yeah, and I'm not really certain. I don't really buy that because I think Herald Army is going to stick together. I mean, he's going to have people who cannot make it down with the speed that some of the others. And of course, he's lost all of his northern troops because they've been defeated at Fulford Gate. I don't know this. Now we got to go off and farm our fields because that you're going to lose your fields or you're going to farm them. Why don't we figure this one out first by defeating the guy who's going to take them from you, and then you can go farm them a couple weeks later. I don't think that really it's going to matter. These are not big huge farms producing thousands of tons of grain.
So they encounter each other, and we saw it's the Battle of Hastings, but it's not at Hastings. Everybody should know that. If you go to Hastings looking for the Battle of Hastings, you're not going to find the Battle of Hastings because that's only where William landed. Actually, not the first time. His second time, he actually landed first at Pevensey, which is just around the Horn and is marvelous, and you should go visit it. It's magnificent. He lands at Pevensey first. That's on the 28th of September. Establishes a quick kind of beachhead there using the existing Roman fortifications. But the next day, he then moves across what was then a bay. It's now just beautiful shoreline to Hastings, sets up his new beachhead there, and then just 2 weeks later, ends up running into Harold Godwinson at Battle, which is named for the battle, not as one of my students once raised their hand and said, "That's amazing that the coincidence that the Battle of Hastings was fought in Battle. Like, did they plan to meet there because it was called Battle?" And it was a very awkward conversation for us all. It's the middle of nowhere when these guys run into each other. There's nothing there. Battle is not there. Battle is named for the Battle of Hastings on the 14th of October.
Although the terrain there is interesting to set, and they did, I think if we had been around at that time, we would have called it lots of hills, rolling hills. That if we're looking at it in that sort of a context, that here'd be a good place for battle. I don't think many people would have suggested it was a good place for battle. It wasn't a lot of flat land. Harold gets there first, establishes his lines on what is called Senlac Hill, but he does it because there's not a lot of flat land to arrive to get to him. It's pretty marshy underneath his.
So this is actually one of the first, I guess, big debates that we had when we were first working on this battle. It was, where was it? And the reason this is kind of a debate is that not necessarily between Kelly and I, but between in the world, is there's this controversy over where was the Battle of Hastings, in part because nothing has ever been found at the site of the battle that is battle remains. So there's no confirmed battle remains there. And as Kelly just said, this is a really strange place to put battle lines. It's all hilly with marshes under the hills. It's off the beaten track. It's a really strange place for this to be happening. So a lot of people have tried to put it in various other places. Kelly and I are unmoved by the attempts to move it. And I think, you can speak for yourself, Kelly, but at least for me, one of the major reasons to believe that this battle happened where it happened is because Battle Abbey was built there under the order of William the Conqueror. And it is a really, really bad place to be building an abbey. It is an inconvenient, unconventional place to put to put an abbey. So why would you do that unless you had to put it there? And it was being put there because it was going to commemorate the battle. So it seems unlikely that you would build this anywhere but where the battle was, because it's such a bad place to build it.
This isn't the first time that somebody puts a building up commemorate the battle. Now, remember, associated with the church also gives it some votive offering, sort of a sense. And you could dress this up however you want, but there was a penance that was required by soldiers for having killed as many people. So this is a double dealing, really. You could set up a monastery at the place and then fund it, and that commemorates where the battle is. It also then serves as atonement for him and his soldiers. And that's important. I mean, they do the same thing. The Portuguese do the same thing at Aljubarrota. There's a small chapel at Bouvines that's put up. And it also then gives that ground a necessary holiness that if his bones have not been found, they are buried on hallowed ground at that point. So I think there's some. It's really hard to get past the big building that says Battle Abbey on it. Especially if it's Battle Abbey, which we know it has that name all the way, at least the nickname, all the way back to the Middle Ages. But you'd be surprised how many people who want the Battle of Hastings to actually happen in their backyard, how they will manipulate that evidence as if, well, why would William put a big building named Battle Abbey up if it wasn't for the troops? Oh, well, it's because of fill in the blank of Looney Tunes after that. There are a couple of others. I mean, people who want it extended over 2 hills and some things like that, or place it on a different hill down there. It is really hard to get out of the way of that big building that's sitting there in ruins right now. Yeah,
and the only question in this regard, and this is something that Kelly and I have fought over, is the tradition at Battle Abbey is that the high altar to the church was placed where William's body was found, and so people have used that then to mark this is the line of the English. So this is where William finds Harold's body. I might have said that wrong a moment ago. So the high altar is built where Harold's body is found, and so people mark the English lines accordingly on that hill where the church is. I sort of not disagreeing with that tradition. To me, that actually may mean that marks William's lines, because you would not necessarily remember where the body was found out where it first fell, because it wouldn't have been left there. Almost from the moment that the body was recognized, that's Harold. They would probably have retrieved the body and brought it to William's tents, brought it to his command for identification and for kind of protecting the body so that he could decide what he wanted to do with it. And that is probably where it was remembered. Not, oh yes, it was by that little spot. No, it wasn't there. It wasn't there for very long. It was there for a couple minutes, and then it got yanked over to here, and that's where it was for hours and hours and hours. So if that's the case, then the battle is off by one battle, if you will. Everything needs to get moved kind of one position, but we can talk about that later or whatever. That's
Well, but it does lead us to an interesting question, which is why can't it be at the original spot? When we got there and you look across this field, it's nice and flat, and a horse could ride it, then right up the hill, which we're told happens in the original sources, right up the hill, right up the hill. Except the problem is that land has been drained purposely, and it was not that way at the time. I mean, the reason we don't actually think that the Norman charges went up that hill and into the lines of Harold, despite the fact that that's how everybody has pictured the battle, because of this manipulation of the terrain to right below the hill, is that the Norman horses could not have made it through the mire with any effectiveness in order to charge up the hill. There are drier spots, in particular one that comes off of a road that is the road that would have led to Hastings, the actual Hastings, where William is camped. So that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, this is a really good point, Kelly, because if you think about where the roads are in this area, the roads are basically following the ridges. And so the way that everybody pictures this battle happening would require William and his army having marched up those roads, which actually would lead directly into Harold's flank. But he would, instead of having to just roll up Harold's flank, he would descend from high ground off the road, go down into the marsh in order to charge back up out of the marsh into Harold's front, his most defended spot. And we thought that didn't make a lot of sense. And so a lot of people have tried to kind of rotate the battle a little bit to keep the traditional site, but make this make a little bit more sense. That gets tough because the way the ridges are, it's not very wide. You can't fit a lot of frontage there for the battle itself. And then it gets hard to figure out the tactics of all this, and things start to fall apart in that regard. Again, if we end up moving the whole battle kind of over one thing so that where everybody thinks the battle happened is actually just where William shows up, and the battle happens actually underneath the town of Battle, then you got a lot more square footage for all this to happen. But of course, no remains have been found in any of these sites, which is also a problem.
And it would be a problem because the battle would be fought more directly on what is now Battle town. And this is where you find in old archaeological journals, oh, so-and-so was digging out a cellar and she found bones or she found weapons and stuff. None of that has happened.
Yeah.
So this is one of these battles that's hidden, and it's possible that nothing will be found. That is the thesis of archaeologists, of conflict archaeologists, who say that the ground there is too filled with iron, and so everything just kind of melds into the ground. It becomes part of the earth, whereas other places, more sandy or more sandstone or limestone, you're going to have the weapons and the remains, the bits and pieces of arms and armor that'll be able to be found, and bits and pieces of horse armor and horse reins and accoutrement could be found as well, because this all comes down to, well, why can't anybody come out of a marsh? Because William's men are their primary wing, maybe not the most numerous wing, but their primary wing of that army is on horse. And first, you go to a horse riding school, the first thing it said, don't take your horse into deep mud. You take your horse into deep mud, it tends to get stuck. And that really kind of ruins your cavalry charge if you're stuck. So I think that all of this kind of comes down to the fact that William, whether Harold knows that William's main arm is cavalry, I would sense that he does. William's used this in a couple of battles before against the French, or whether he just has picked a spot that is going to be difficult, where he can actually see where the horses are coming and not be outflanked, is important to consider, and that's what we have.
Now, it should be said, it's not the horses that hit first. It is Norman archers that hit first. So this is actually a question and that gets debated a lot among people who write about Hastings. I'm not sure if we want to drop names or not. I'll let you do that if you want, Kelly. Some people believe that the Norman archers really decide this battle. They're the ones who strike first. And there's some thought that is the difference maker. I don't think either one of us agrees with that. Is that right?
I think the archers, everybody, you kind of have to think back. We'll begin to talk about this. One of the reasons that we've called this the bow and the blade is that archery is, until we get to the age of gunpowder, is the sole means of launching projectiles at a troop. But why? Why do they do it? We're talking about a period when we either don't have the longbow, or we certainly don't have the longbow in great numbers. So we're dealing with bows that are there, and you have to think about the purpose. The men on the Anglo-Saxon side, on the English side, Harold's troops are very well, according to the Bayeux Tapestry and all contemporary other illustrations, shows the troops on both sides being very well armored, with mail armor, chainmail, for those of you who might think that there is other mail armor that covers their shoulders, their upper arms, and down across the torso and across the groins. This is a Carolingian Burney, if you want to think about it. But they've also started adding a coif of mail over the head to protect the neck, and leggings. We see leggings on a couple of them. We're still not past, until the Second Crusade, you're going to get more encased body in mail, but it's still completely effective. And the idea that a short bow somehow could blow these links apart and be very damaging, I think is completely wrong. Including the fact that there's only one guy. We'll come back to this. There's only one guy with showing an arrow that actually does hit into his armor. In this case, into an eye. But we'll bring that up later, Mike. You have something to say about that?
I do have something to say about that. So we think. I mean, the archers. It would still suck to have a bunch of arrows coming at you. It's not like wearing chain makes you impermeable. It would still be bad, but we don't think this was just mowing down the English here or anything. They were pretty much fine. Let's hunker down in our shield wall, and we're all right. And then comes
two things it does do.
Yep.
I just already break in. Two things it does do. And we'll come back to this because it does it in every battle. If you're using troops like these, what you are trying to do is, one, get the other side scared enough that those people who are not determined to sit and fight leave. Many medieval battles are won when the other side leaves. And the second is that it tightens them up, it softens them up, it does make them a little more in confusion, the line in confusion, so that when the main army comes up, the infantry, as we'll see next, and then the cavalry, there's going to have already been casualties. There's going to have already have been some sort of difficulty. Now, Harold has archers too, but they don't seem to have much effect at all in any what we're talking about, and that's maybe because they can't be used the same way that William uses his archers. Harold's lines are fixed, and he can move his archers up on the side.
At least not that's recorded. We do have a problem here that there are so few sources of detail about Hastings, which was tremendously difficult for Kelly and I. We were trying to reconstruct this. We've only got a very small set of facts to deal with, and almost all of them are from one side of this battle, and they tend to sort of view things rather positively about their side, which is no surprise. That's how we tend to tell our own histories. So that does cause a problem.
Yeah, and there are three or four archers on Bayeux Tapestry, one of whom is Anglo-Saxon. So there's archers on both sides at this point. yeah, I don't think that they had a lot of effect. But the English love their bows.
That they do. That they do. So then we get the charge coming in. Here comes the charge. This is infantry followed by cavalry, or cavalry followed by infantry.
I've always thought it was infantry followed by cavalry. At least that's the way that William of Poitiers writes it, and I think Guy of Amiens also in his Song of the Battle of Hastings. Both of them have the infantry hit first. In fact, William has a bit, or maybe it's a later Anglo-Norman source, Henry of Huntingdon or William of Malmesbury, but they actually have this idea that the English, that the Norman infantry lines are being very effective. So effective that the cavalry get jealous. Now, that may just be a trope, because that seems to happen quite often. But there's no doubt that the 1-2 punch is infantry pull back or go to the sides, and then the charges of cavalry again behind them. Pretty standard, actually, for a medieval battle.
Yeah. So the hits start coming here. Get a volley of ranged weapons, arrows going in, and then here comes the infantry pulling out, and then cavalry trying to kind of push that advantage, right, and break the shield wall that Harold is using here. The English are using a shield wall. This is men closely packed together, shields close to interlocking, if not fully interlocking, to create literally a wall of shields to prevent you from coming through. And if you got close, they'll poke and prod you if you get close enough. But even as you're approaching, they're going to throw stuff over the shield wall, spears, rocks, anything they can. Be shooting arrows, and they're going to and hold ground, and then advance if you start falling apart on your attack against them. Which comes to this question of feigned retreats. So our sources say that at a certain point, the Normans start falling back, and the English, some portion of the English forces, charge down after them. This is, as Kelly said a moment ago, kind of how most battles typically kind of ended, is one line breaks, and as soon as the line breaks, then you chase after them and mow them down. It's a rout at that point. And everybody's, people that are dying are getting it in the back. So it seems like a portion of the English line is awesome. The Normans are retreating. Let's go mow them down. And then the Normans turn around and fall on these English who have left the safety of the shield wall and killed them.
Not just the left, kill the ones that are safety in the shield wall itself, or have left the safety of the shield wall. But the shield wall then has got to accommodate for those missing people that have run down after the cavalry. I mean, the reason why the shield wall exists is because it is a wall. It is essentially a field fortification. You just described this. Horses can't get through that. Men can't get through that either. They can go over it. They can go under it, perhaps. Not horses, but the men can go over it or under it. The horses just turn around and retreat back because there's no point, or they stop because there's no point. Now, with the hole in that shield wall, that man who's run down the field and probably got himself killed before he get back up, or at least got himself run off totally before he got up, that hole has got to be accommodated because now a horse can fit through.
Yeah.
And that is difficult to, because now you don't have a single shield wall or a single field fortification. You've got 2 or 3 or many more. And now these are getting smaller and smaller numbers that can be taken care of by subsequent Norman charges.
And the sources, interestingly, disagree with each other on whether or not the first of these actions was intentional or not. We do have a couple sources that indicate that this was all planned on William's part. Now, these are sources coming from William's court, so I don't trust them one bit. I think that's a damn dirty lie. This was, in fact, an actual disorganized retreat on the part of the Normans. That this first time it happens, it is not at all planned. This is simply the Normans failing to break that shield wall and collapsing back, and rout is upon them. The English are right to think that Now is the time. Let's go get them. But William manages to stave off a complete rout by lifting his helmet and showing, I'm still alive, we're fine. He stops that retreat, turns everybody around, and they fall upon these men. And as Kelly said, we now have a shield wall that is to some degree fractured, that then has to kind of coalesce itself. And William, having realized the efficacy of this on the field, is like, well, hell, let's try that again. And does it at least one more time, according to William of Poitiers, who is our earliest, kind of probably best source. Perhaps twice. It depends exactly on how you read his Latin, whether he does this once or twice more. Each time, the shield wall becoming more and more difficult to sustain. And each time the Normans launching more arrows, probably launching them into those gaps to prevent them from being kind of closed in. As more counter assaults try and break the line, until the point that they do break the line. And part of this, and we don't know when this happens, but at some point, Harold's brothers go down. Harold Godwinson's brothers go down.
He's got 2 on the battlefield, 2 light remaining on the battlefield.
Yes, two brothers there. And when they go down, he's now losing command and control of his army. So he's already battered by these breaks that have formed and hopefully closed up, but it's becoming more difficult. Now he's losing command and control. And it's probably around that point that finally the Normans break through and Harold is killed.
And I think getting up to that final scene actually prepares us to know what's happening in the main battle and why these retreats are working, and how the English are trying to accommodate the new formation that they need to make. Because we read that when Gareth and Leof, when the two brothers go down, and they go down in separate engagements, but it seems to be maybe the same reaction to the charge, or roughly the same time, that the shield wall will again form around Harold, but it's much smaller. And if there is any credibility to the altar being placed where he is killed rather than where he's brought, that would have been that spot where they would have gathered around and formed what is essentially a shield wall square at this point. The fact that they can still do that there are still and these could have been the more elite warriors, what we call the housecarl, which means bodyguard essentially. That these could still have enough cohesion and so forth, because everybody else is probably fleeing from the battle at this point, recognizing that it's over. And you have to think about it sometimes not just from William's part, because William is, and what Micah said is absolutely true. There's so much evidence to suggest that at least one of these feigned charges, and I would say the first one as well, is not a feigned charge at all. They are retreating and they're leaving because they feel that the rumor has gone out that William has died. And it's so very obvious. The Bayeux Tapestry had this amazing scene where William picks up, and you got to recognize that it's the nasal helmet. So he actually has a handle on his helmet that he can take and lift it off his head to show that he's in fact alive. That gives you also sort of an answer to the generic nature of everybody's equipment, arms and armor in this case. But he's able to show it, and they respond, and they keep charging. Every charge is going to pull more and more troops away, and not just the ones that follow them, but the ones that go the opposite direction too, that we hear about later on, that are all trying to get back to London, trying to get away from the field. But there is this group that puts a fortress around, a shield wall around Harold, and it doesn't hold. It's not strong enough. Yeah, I'll die there. Of course, he's shot in the eye, right?
to the misfortune of many of the things that you can find in the gift store today. Harold did not die with an arrow in the eye. In fact, that image from the Bayeux Tapestry, the most famous image of the Battle of Hastings, which is of a gentleman, and he appears to be, it looks like he's holding on to an arrow that is embedded in his people say in his eye. If you actually look at it, it's like skimming his forehead. But that that image is a false one. That's actually the result of 19th century repair work that took what was originally a man holding a spear, getting ready to throw it towards the Normans. That had kind of fallen apart. And when they fixed it, they changed it to an arrow going the opposite direction and then bent it. If you look, the arrow's bent. They bent it to try and get it as close as they could to going into his eye. And yeah, so that dude isn't even Harold. That's just some poor schmuck on the English side. Some poor fellow. The next man in the Bayeux Tapestry, that is Harold Godwinson, and he's being cut down by a man on horseback. So a man on horseback is slashing down with his sword and killing him. In fact, kind of cutting him upper leg area, as they often say in the in our sources. He had a leg injury, euphemism. So it's slashing down towards his groin area, which is a good place to be hitting because as the man is falling, his protection, his armor is kind of probably coming up. And so he's able to get in there and see, he's slashing as he drives by. That's how Harold died. He didn't get it in the eye. That's all silliness. It's just he got run down, and it was probably kind of not very pretty. He was then probably hacked up to some degree before men were able to control, protect the corpse again, and then pull it off of the battlefield. And pull it to the tent because people would want to get their strike in against the body, and we see this in other battles as well of people taking pot shots at the corpse of the king, and that does certainly would have happened here too until they got his body out of the way. So yeah, sorry if you've got a mug or a T-shirt with the dude getting it in the eye, but that's not true. I do have one of the mugs, though, by God.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And we all do. It's the romantic in us. We want to see a king with an arrow in his eye. And especially English kings, because they always end up seemingly with arrows stuck somewhere.
Yeah.
William Rufus and Richard having, those legends that Richard's a porcupine out there.
And poor Prince Hal on the battlefield at Shrewsbury gets an...
In fact, that seems to be where the magnet for arrowheads is on a royalty. You probably ought to take that magnetic crown off your head before you go into battle.
Bad news.
No, I mean the original sources. I think there is one later one, maybe Wace, who says that there's an arrow in the eye. So the tradition had maybe gone in that direction, but the original sources, and especially the eyewitnesses, William of Poitiers. He and Guillaume, they both say that Harold is just cut down, and if he had an arrow in his eye, it probably would have been stood out. But it's we want to have a more glorious death. It is curious that they had at least one of the sources indicates that they had to bring Harold's widow. It's a hard one because he isn't really married to her. His mistress, favorite wife, whatever you want to call it. And her name is Edith Swaneshallis, which means she had evidently a long neck, a swan's neck. And she has to identify him by means other than his face. Harold himself, Harold Godwinson himself, had to identify his brother at Stamford Bridge by a wart between his shoulders. So probably in the death throes and with the ensuing damage to a royal corpse, it becomes difficult to discern exactly who it is. Consequently, there are some later stories that Harold survives this battle. You got any?
There are.
Any credibility there?
Those are false.
Yeah.
Those are false.
William survives.
Again, sorry to disappoint anybody who's like, oh yeah, no, Harold lived and he's the real king. No, he died.
Yeah, he was taken out.
He bit it, and William had his body buried such that nobody would know where it was. He did not want the body and the burial place becoming a sort of central location for insurgent feelings or something like that, right? It's trying to prevent that idea of nativist, nationalist, whatever ist you want to put, gathering around that site. He wanted to eliminate that, so he's had the body taken care of and disposed quietly. So we do not know where Harold's body is. There are rumors of it being here and there. I would not place bets on any of those rumors, folks. Again,
no, but our English friends then can go back into their backyard and start digging, because this is a real mystery.
Hey, if you're listening and want to dig in your backyard and you find Harold, like, let us know.
Call us.
Let us know.
Yeah. We should be the first to know.
What is the one piece of information that you wish you had about Hastings that our sources do not give us, Kelly?
That's a really good question. I'd love to know. I think I'd really love to know what the English thought at the time that they see the Norman army. Are they still flushed with victory? Do they still think they could take them on? But on the Norman side, I'd love to have a little more motivation for why William attacks this position of Harold's. Why does he not try to lure Harold into a different place where maybe his horses would have a better advantage? I think this Stephen Murillo has called this an odd battle. What was the term? I can't remember the term Steve used. Unusual battle because of the length of time it was fought. I think I have to agree there. And so it would be really nice to know why William did. He's the invader after all. Why he doesn't lure Harold to a different spot where maybe he can operate his horses.
Yeah, I actually kind of am curious along the same lines. As I mentioned earlier, this is a battle that doesn't happen on the main road. And I would really like to know why. I mean, why is this not on the main drag, if you will? There's a main road, a main route that goes back to the Romans for an army. If you're trying to get an army out of the Hastings area, off that what was then a peninsula, and up north, there's a route, and this is off of it. And I would like to know why. We have no source that says why this is. Now, as Kelly said, it appears that the English take position first. I assume that means that they're the ones who go off of the route first. So is this a case where Harold's scouts have recognized that the Normans are coming, that the Normans have realized, that their scouts have said that the English are coming? So William is bringing his army. I need to find my best spot to fight. And it is off the beaten path, or not off the beaten path, but off the main route that he realizes I've got a great position I can take. Is that why this happens? Or has Harold already thrown that die and he's coming around, maybe hoping to come from an unexpected direction to surprise the Normans, as he had against Harold Hardrada in the Battle of Stamford Bridge? He wins that by surprising, by coming upon the enemy unexpectedly. Is that the reason he's taking this sort of different approach to the area along these lesser traveled roads? Is that why this happens? Because so much of why this happens where it is because of whatever that is. And so that's why we end up in this spot that is kind of unexpected. And then everybody is now responding to that terrain. And Harold takes the best position he can. And as Kelly said, William has to go against that. And yeah, wouldn't it be nice to know, what's William thinking? Is he I'm just going to keep bashing my head against this wall until it breaks, or what? Because he does for hours and hours at a lot of cost. It's really rough.
At a lot of cost. On the other hand, once he knows that the king and his brothers are there, he knows that if he can defeat them, the chances that he'll have to fight another battle will be less. And of course, there is no Battle of Hastings 2. So I think that probably encourages him along. It's a risky endeavor, though. I mean, there's no way to set this out at the very beginning and say William is destined to win.
Yeah, all battles are inherently risky, and this is a throw of the dice for both of these guys. It really is. It's a throw of the dice for Harold to be even fighting this battle at all. He could have stayed in London and said, come at me. Have your fun down there if you'd like, but you gotta dislodge me, and you won't be able to. Instead, he comes out, gambles on this, and William makes his gamble, as Kelly said, instead of retreating back towards Hastings and setting up lines and asking for battle to come his direction. They instead try to do it now, and it does end very badly for the English. This makes Hastings one of the rather few battles that are truly decisive, and it's decisive because all three of the Godwinson brothers bite it on the field. There's nobody left really to coalesce even a defense about, and though the Norman Conquest nevertheless does take some years to get done, it's pretty much
the conquest does. Yeah, the battle's over.
Yeah, it's done. It's done. It's just working out the details for the next couple months for William to get to London and get crowned at Westminster. So the Battle of Hastings, a good times. They're calling for the last call on the drinks, man. Which side would you rather be on in the Battle of Hastings?
Now that's kind of fun. An easy answer for me, but just a little different to say. Your heart is almost always with the English. If you're writing about it, you want this to kind of turn their way, especially when they've defeated the so-called last Viking army up in the north. I got to go with the Normans, though, and there's one reason: they win.
I was hoping you were going to say something cool like that's where Taillefer is, the great mummer who comes out at the beginning of the battle before the bloodshed. The first bloodshed is done by this poet who comes out, gives a little song and dance routine, juggles a bit, and when an Englishman comes out to kick him off the field, he beheads him, and thus begins the battle in the first place.
That may be stretched a bit.
Yeah, it probably didn't happen, but that's a cool scene.
It's a great.
You want to be on.
It's an absolute.
You want to be on that guy's side.
Being with a guy who turns his name from William the Bastard to William the Conqueror in one fell swoop does have some, good. I mean, make no pretense to the fact that I probably wouldn't be a horseman in his army, but I would have liked to be on the winning side.
It would have been.
What about you?
Yeah, well, I mean, they win. They get the stuff. But you are absolutely right that as on a romantic standpoint, or if I was writing a historical novel about this, it's so hard not to have your heart with the English side. As you said, what Harold has gone through just in the past 2 weeks leading up to this battle is amazing, and there's just this kind of romantic sense of, he could pull this out. No, he can't. He can't pull it out. It really is. It's bad. It's bad. And yeah, Edith Swan Neck has to come out and figure out who he is by certain signs that only she would know. And we can let all our listeners fill in the blank on what that might be. So there you go.
Yeah, they're clicking the lights. I think they want us out of here.
Bar is closed, folks. So we hope that you can join us for our next episode of Bow and Blade, where we'll be talking about one of the most important battles you've likely never heard of, but had a direct correlation to all this happening at Hastings, actually, the Battle of Brunanburh. This podcast is brought to you by medievalists.net. The best way to support us is to join their Patreon, which also offers some great extras like a book of the month and maps of the medieval world. So visit patreon.com/medievalists. Cheers.
See you next time.